Hey everyone, welcome to our first week of our series, The Joy of With, being glad to be together. We all want to experience a life full of joy, and one of the main ways that comes about is in great relationships with one another and with God. To do that, we got to have a great foundation, and so this week we begin building with hope. Let's lean in for our series here as we jump into Christmas. We're doing a series called The Joy of With, being glad to be together. And maybe we just need to feel it first. So it's like this. It's written all over a parent's face when they walk in and look on a soundly sleeping child. It's seeing a close friend after months and months apart. It's that first sight as that military spouse, parent, or child clears security coming back from TDY or deployment. It's the smile on a grandparent's face when a grandkid comes in for an overdue hug. On a wedding day, it's the look exchanged from opposite ends of the aisle at first sight. It's the look on a mom and dad's face the very first time their newborn child is looking right back at them. In fact, it's so strong that it's the look on the face of someone in the most desperate, difficult moment of their life when a friend who deeply loves them and just came to sit with them shows up. These moments that we can feel all the way to the core of who we are could be captured in a single word: joy. Let's not complicate this. Joy, a way to define joy, a simple way, is this: a gladness to be together. There's a lot of ways to define joy, but a scientist recently, not even a follower of Jesus, has defined it this way. As he looked across the way that our brains are wired and our lives unfold, this sense of joy that goes all the way to the core of us, that fires in our brain before we even realize what it is a gladness to be together. And isn't that where we experience joy? Isn't that what we long for? In fact, let's just take another moment to feel it. Before we talk about it, talking about it is one thing, experiencing it is something else. Right? We all long to experience it. But let's just take a moment and let's think back. In fact, I just want to give you a gift. In a crazy, busy, hustling season, I just want to be generous with you and give you 20 seconds of total silence. Okay? So here's what we're going to do. I want you to prepare for it. Why don't you set down your phones? If you're in any kind of uncomfortable position, try to shift a little bit and get comfortable for a minute. Some of you are like, this is about to get weird. And you're a little right. Okay? I'm not gonna lie, but it's only weird if you make it weird, so just lean in, okay? Set some things aside, silent mode if you need. If you're a feverish note taker, no need to take notes for the next few minutes, just experience, okay? What we're gonna do is we're gonna cultivate joy. But to prepare for that, let's just calm ourselves and arrive. So I'm gonna give you about 15 or 20 seconds of silence, and I just wanna encourage you. If it helps you to close your eyes, do that. But take some really deep, long breaths in and breaths out, and just relax for a moment, okay? Go ahead, take some deep breaths. I just want to invite you to call to mind a joyful memory, particularly one where you felt connected to God. Sort through your memory and call to a joyful time to mind, particularly where you felt connected to God. Once you have it, I want you to just explore it, savor it, lean into it. Let it play out in your mind like a movie, and do it with every sense. In your memory, what were you smelling? What were you hearing? What were you tasting? What did it feel like? All 5 senses, one at a time, just work through them slowly in your memory. Take just a second and give your memory just like a 2-word name. The one I was working with this morning, Ragnar Downhill, that was mine. Just a simple name that doesn't mean anything to anybody else but to you. Give your memory a name. And before you leave it, one last thing. Consider that God is glad to be together with you in that memory. And ask him a simple question. God, do you have anything you want to say to me in this memory right now? God, thanks for a moment to slow down. God, thank you that we could even anticipate hearing from you. God, I just pray that you would cultivate more and more moments of joy like this in our lives. In Jesus' name, amen. We did this on Tuesday night at a night of prayer. We've done this a few times along the way, and it's actually deeply rooted in some brain science in the way that we actually experience life, that often we lean on the thoughtful, logical side of our life, but the way we actually experience life is very sensory and relational. And God meets us in both of those. In fact, what we realize in thinking about moments like this is we know this, but sometimes we forget. We are wired for connection. We really want great relationships. You'll never meet a single healthy person who says, you know what I dream for my life is isolation and loneliness all the way to the end. No one says that. No one. No one says, listen, I hope that every relationship in my life is barely functional and kind of terrible. No one says this. We long for connection with one another. And what we find out is that when in the story of God and the way that he's wired us is we were actually wired for deep relational connection with him that flourishes in our relationships with one another. This is where we experience joy. When we see someone's face light up that we have arrived, that we can sense with them that we're glad to be with them and they're glad to be to us. This is, like I said, that simple definition of joy. Being glad to be together is where we experience joy. And this joy in life is available when we have people that we were really glad to be together with. We know the difference of walking up to the table at the wedding reception and recognizing the long stories with these deep friends that we're about to sit with, or the moment where you don't know a single person. Very different experiences, right? We long to have deep connection, a gladness to be together with other people. And God invites us to acknowledge, and this is crazy to think about, but that he is glad to be with us. And that he invites us to be glad to be with him. For the next 4 weeks, what we're really going to do is to lean in and how do we cultivate those kind of relationships with one another and with God. Some of us here would call ourselves followers of Jesus. We call ourselves Christians, and we want that kind of relationship. We want to cultivate that and grow that, and we're going to find out how. We're going to follow Jesus' example. We're going to look at what God has said, and we're going to practice and experience that kind of relationship with God. And every single one of you, any single one of us who may not have, you wouldn't say you have a relationship with God. You are invited to begin at any moment. God longs for it. You'll see over and over and over how he's paved a way to say to you personally that he would be glad to be with you. And even beyond that, even if you're not so sure about this whole Jesus thing, I'll tell you that anytime you live Jesus' way, you'll see things around you grow and flourish. Your friendships, your marriage, your family can flourish as we lean into some foundational principles of relationship. Because the story of God, first and foremost, is a story of relationship. We talked about this for 8 weeks, that God's so intent on relationship with us, orchestrated the most amazing rescue in Jesus. We did this through the whole Good News series. We discovered it together in groups. It was so good. How what is at the core of the gospel of Jesus is not a means to an end. It's not transactional. It's a means to a relationship that never ends, where we can be glad to be together with God and find a fresh and new way to be glad to be together with other people around us. And then we talked about how God sets up camp in our lives. The Holy Spirit settles into our lives, and we can be glad to be together with Him and He with us. And we find in that extraordinary strength, extraordinary help, extraordinary transformation and growth, and along with that, extraordinary good as the Spirit bears fruit in our life. This has always been God's desire. Flourishing relationships with Him and with one another. He actually spoke things into existence with that in mind. And certainly we find that in the life of Jesus. In fact, in John 15, Jesus says as much to some of His very closest friends. On the night before He would give His life for all of us, He's trying to pull all of this together. And we saw this if you did the Good News study. In fact, the guys that I leaned in with just drilled into one of these statements right in the middle. I'll show you. In chapter 15, verse 9, it says, Jesus is looking at His friends. He says, I've loved you. I've loved you even as the Father has loved me. I've been glad to be with you. You've been glad to be with me. Now He says, remain. Make a home. Stay in my love. When you obey my commandments, you remain in my love just as I obey the Father's commandments and remain in His love. I've told you these things so that you will be filled with what? My joy. Jesus says, here's what I want for you. Isn't this what you want for you? Nobody wants, you know what, joy's overrated, I'll take less. No one says that. No. But Jesus wants for you what you want for you. He longs for you. In fact, He says it even more firmly. In case you missed it, He says, yes, your joy will overflow. This gladness to be with others and this gladness to be with God can overflow, flourish, thrive. He says, this is my commandment, love each other. Love each other in the same way I have loved you. And so this is what we'll lean into. In fact, it's no mystery that when Jesus says this, He wasn't saying it to an individual. He was saying it to a group of people, a group of friends who would live on. And the moments of challenge that we would see in the story of God unfold, they would be standing together, weeping together, singing together, arrested together, rescued together, all of these things, glad to be together and experiencing God's presence. This is what God wants for us, and so this is what we're going after. So for the next month, this whole Christmas season, we're gonna look into the Christmas story and all of the story of God and say, how is it that our relationship with God first and foremost, and then of course in our relationship with one another, how do those flourish and become marked by more and more and more moments of joy? How might our joy actually overflow? How might we find out that Jesus was exactly right? Now, some of you grew up in different church traditions and you are used to celebrating this season of Advent. Now, we don't practice it in all the same ways that other people do, but actually, as I notice, as I look at the themes of Advent, they're actually like perfect foundations for thriving relationships. That as we look at what God accomplished in this season of expecting Jesus' arrival, one theme at a time, they actually provide some really great relational foundations. They are hope, every relationship needs it. Faith and committedness, every relationship needs it. Joy, moments of great fullness and gladness to be together, every relationship needs it. Love, a self-sacrificial prioritizing the good of another, every relationship needs it. And peace, moments of wholeness and being put back together, absolutely. These are so foundational. In fact, God models this for us in Jesus. And when we value, practice, and experience these in our relationships, we experience joy in our relationships, not only with God, but with one another can flourish. And so this week, we're gonna begin. We're gonna dive right in on hope. Every single relationship requires hope. And here's a simple definition for hope: a confident expectation of good. How many of you met someone and said, I'm gonna invest in a relationship because I think this is gonna be a train wreck? We don't invest, that's not how we enter relationships. We enter relationships that hold hope for us. We meet someone who says, wow, you're an inspiring, energizing person. You have a beauty and an intrigue and a creativity and a wit that are just so inviting. I've seen the person that you are, and I just want to connect with you. It's hope that we're experiencing. An expectation of good from them for us and also from us to them. That's how relationships flourish. It's why marriages begin, that we feel like a life together would be so much better and hold so much possibility differently than a life apart. In moments of relationship, when we start to question that hope, it's time to lean in with relational repair. When our expectations are different than we thought, we got to reclarify, recalibrate, have a little DTR, define the relationship conversation, right? Everybody's favorite. And when we lose hope, relationships crumble, and separation is what comes, and it hurts because we weren't wired for that. It's not what we long for, right? Hope is essential to every relationship. So what we're going to do for the next few minutes is we're going to look at why in our relationship with God might we have hope. It's good at the Christmas season for followers of Jesus to rehearse why we have such deep and long-standing confident hope, right? And then we'll apply that and walk that quickly into our relationships with one another. Now, I want to treat this moment a little bit different than some others. Have you ever, you meet someone and you know someone else and you're like, you guys have to meet each other? Like, you meet them and you find out just enough about them that this other person is just ringing in your ears and have you ever met this person? Because you have to meet this person. You have so much in common. You would love one another. You would enjoy one another. You would laugh deeply together. It would be epic if we were all in the same place. This is what we're going to do. For the next little bit, I'm just going to rehearse this long history of God and why we can have such great hope. Because my desire is that every single person that we meet, every single one of us, would come into deep, meaningful relationship with God. And so if you've never encountered God, this is just going to be kind of a, let me tell you about my friend kind of moment. And my hope is that it would stir up hope in you, that you would expect good from God, because that's exactly what God has in mind for you. Now, some of you, have you ever introduced someone and you realize they already know each other? Right? That's going to be the experience for many of you who follow Jesus. But the beauty of those kind of moments is that what immediately starts to happen is positive gossip. You both just start saying all the great things that you love about those people. Like, oh, I know them. You're right. They're so great. This is it. And for followers of Jesus, this next little bit, just let it be a moment of worship, of acknowledging how good God is and why we can have our hope rest deeply in him. We see this kind of tucked into the Christmas story. In Matthew chapter 1, you're familiar with this kind of story. If you're not, in Jesus' arrival, it's pretty dramatic, right? There's this guy named Joseph who's engaged to this woman named Mary. And if there was ever a time where a relationship could come off the rails, it's when a father or when a soon-to-be husband finds out he's going to be a father and it's not his. That's a moment where whoa, DTR, let's have a conversation. That's not what I was expecting. Somewhere along the line, these two young people in the first century committed, their families together, committed to a life together. And I'm sure they had hope and expectation for a great life together. And then suddenly this realization that Mary was pregnant and it wasn't his. Now, thankfully, God engages and says, don't lose hope, right? Aaron will actually lean into this story a little bit further next week, but let me pick it up in verse 20. It says, as Joseph considered this, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream. Joseph, son of David, the angel said, do not be afraid. Fear wrecks relationships. When our hope starts to diminish, we get afraid and we separate and we often run. But as he considered, it says, look, don't be afraid to take Mary as your wife, for the child within her was conceived by the Holy Spirit. And as she will have a son, you are to name him Jesus, for he will save people from their sins. This introduction is epic. And then what happens next is really cool. I don't know if you think like this. But the book of Matthew, the story of Jesus' life, this one of the biographies, or a kind of biography of Jesus that this guy named Levi or Matthew, who was a friend of Jesus, wrote down, he captures this moment. But he's not experiencing it in real time like us. He's looking back after Jesus' resurrection and trying to capture Jesus' life. And so he takes this moment right next to back up and say, look, Joseph didn't know at the moment. Mary didn't know at the moment. Levi certainly didn't know at the moment. He was off collecting taxes somewhere when this happened. But when he looks back on it in real time, he says, look, all of this occurred to fulfill the Lord's message through his prophet. Look, the virgin will conceive a child. She will give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means what? God with us, glad to be with us. Levi, or Matthew, is one of the close friends of Jesus, and many of them, once they had met and experienced Jesus, had this habit of looking across the long history of God's people and realizing that moment after moment after moment after moment over hundreds of years on multiple continents in many places, the story of God was all pointing to this moment of Jesus' arrival, death, burial, resurrection, and rescue. And so Matthew, when he's telling the story of the first this Christmas story of Mary and Joseph, he reaches back to this time 720 plus years before Jesus would be born. But you could actually go farther. This is why our friend God is so reliable. From the very beginning, he spoke us into a context of joy, uninterrupted relationship with him. And then even when Adam and Eve totally screwed it up, and God is saying there are real consequences, in the midst of that, he speaks a word of hope. In the curse of the serpent, he says, look, you will snip at the heel, but your head will be crushed, pointing forward to this moment of Jesus. Not long after that, he would speak into the life of a guy named Abram and his wife Sarah and say, listen, I have plans for you. You don't have any kids, you're 100 years old, but I'm gonna turn your family into a nation. I'm gonna give you a land in which to live, and I'm gonna bless you and the world through you so much that people will know I'm God. And so Abram and Sarah, one step at a time, not knowing where they were going, went on a journey. Their family eventually grows to about 70 people, and you'd think it would all lose hope and come off the rails when those 70 people hit such hard times, they find themselves in Egypt in slavery. But even there, God was a God of hope. Over the next 400 years, not only did God sustain them, but he did exactly what he said he would do. He turned Abram's family into a nation of 2 million plus people. And then this kind of failure named Moses is called by God to go back and face the strongest ruler on the planet and carry those 2 million people right on God's heels out of slavery and on their way to a brand new land. God says, you'll be my people. Let's live like this together. Let me be your God. Moses messes up and doesn't find his way into the promised land, but a young leader named Joshua, who had followed Moses along the way, wasn't young when he took over, but God, step by step, battle by battle, carries them through river, opens water, conquers cities, goes ahead of them, moments of hope all the way through. And even though those whiny people got complaining in the desert and had to spend an extra 40 years wandering around, God fed them every day. And I just sympathize. I have 4 kids. Every day they want to eat, every day. Like 3 times, it's ridiculous. Still in the midst of that, they finally find their way into the land. God keeps his promise. He's a God of hope. He follows through. He keeps his promises. He has good in mind. They screwed it up in the garden. They screwed it up in Egypt. They screwed it up in the desert. And God, over and over, I have good, I have good, I have good, I have good. I'm glad to be with you. I'll meet you on the mountain. Moses, I'll meet you in the tent. Let me be your God. And these people say, oh, that's so great, God, but we'd really like a king like everybody else. Can we have a king? And God's like, you don't need a king. You have me. No. You won't like that. Don't do that. It's not good for you. I have better in mind for you. They demand it, and God says, okay, y'all gonna have a king. First one was a total mess. He was good for a while, total stud, and then he screwed it up. And then this next guy comes along. His name's David, man after God's own heart. And God again makes an epic promise. Hundreds and hundreds of years before Jesus looks at him and says, someone from your line will sit on a throne forever, pointing hundreds and hundreds of years forward to this moment that Matthew captured. David's a pretty good king, has a son who's, and then a son who's like, oh my. And then there's another one and another one and another one. And king after king does exactly what God says. They screw it up. They become more like the world than God intended for them to be. But all the way through, God so lovingly came alongside and said, I have better for you. I have good in mind. Turn back to me. Let me lead you. Follow in the way I marked out for you. And so God sends these people called prophets. And over, they warn the people, don't go this way. God has good in mind. Come back to him. Follow his way. And in the midst of that, it's just like impossible for these prophets, even in the midst of their warnings and judgment communicated, to have moments and beacons of hope, because God is a God of hope. He always has good in mind for us. This is where we find ourselves colliding with what Matthew said, what Matthew recorded, and Isaiah actually said over 700 years before Jesus. If you wonder if God has been up to something, when you say something 700 years before it happens, you're up to something. You got a plan in place. You have good in mind. And so we capture this in Isaiah. It would have been written before 700 BC. And he says this, listen well, the royal family of David. Isn't it enough to exhaust human patience? Must you exhaust the patience of my God as well? He says, all right, then the Lord himself will give you a sign. Look, the virgin will conceive a child. She will give birth to a son and will call him Emmanuel, God with us. Never a moment of losing hope, even in the midst of warning and tragedy. Isaiah chapter 9, even after going back to some warnings and judgment that may come around, Isaiah chapter 9, nevertheless, he says, that time of darkness and despair will not go on forever. God had good in mind. Verse 6, for a child is born to us, a son is given to us. The government will rest on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. His government and its peace will never end. He will rule with fairness and justice from the throne of his ancestor David for all eternity. The passionate commitment. Did you catch that? The passionate commitment of the Lord. One who has good in mind, who has always had good in mind, who has strategized and planned and accounted for good all the way along, of the Lord of heaven's armies will make this happen. He goes right back to judgment and warning because the people were totally screwing this up and they were about to go into exile. A couple hundred years later, they'd be carried off, or 150 years later, they'd be carried off. But by chapter 11, he's right back to it. Check it out, verse 1. Out of the stump of David's family. Just call that picture in mind. It's a cool picture. Beautiful, massive tree, cut off at the ground. This is what was happening to God's people. He says, but even from there, a shoot will come up. I will call life out of what seems to be broken and dead. This is God's habit. Yes, a new branch bearing fruit from the old root, and the Spirit of the Lord will rest on him, meaning Jesus. The Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the spirits of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. He will delight in obeying the Lord. He will not judge by appearance, nor make any decision on hearsay. He will give justice to the poor and make fair decisions for the exploited. The earth will shake at the force of his word, and one breath from his mouth will destroy the wicked. Over and over and over, you could just sort through prophet after prophet, warning, 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 hope, warning, 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 hope. Over and over, God has been a God of hope. God has been at work and up to something, orchestrating good for the people that he loves, which, by the way, is everyone. He has said across the whole course of the scripture, he is glad to be with us, and he's asking the question, would you be glad to be with me? Those who knew and experienced Jesus, they had this habit of looking and finding hope everywhere they go. God was always up to something. He was always inviting people in his direction, giving them hope all along the way. And so listen, in this introduction, whether you know Jesus, I hope it just fills you with confidence. Man, he's been working at this for so long. He's been up to so much good. What we celebrate in Christmas was no like flash in the pan. It was all planned all the way along. God had good in mind. And for many of you who may not have found your way in the direction of Jesus, God has been after you for a long time. He has made a way, paved a way, found a way, over and over and over, saying he's glad to be with us. And so at Christmas time, we rehearse and we celebrate this long reputation that God has of promise-keeping. Two key things I want you to walk away with very quickly from that. One, we can hope in God. When it comes to God, he's not like a frustrated dad. He's not a distant, angry boss. He's not someone who is grabbing tightly to what he has and you just got to earn and wiggle and grasp away from him. He has good in mind. When you walk with God, you can confidently expect good. We can hope in him. There is no relational foundation stronger than the one that God has laid over centuries for us. His character is established. It has never changed. He has made promises. He always keeps them. We can hope in God. He has good for you. And second, I just hope this goes all the way to the core of who you are. God is glad to be with you. At the thought of you turning your face toward him, his face lights up. Like a parent's first eye contact with a brand new baby. Like a loving friend watching you do something you love and flourish at it. God is glad to be with you. Richard Foster says that if you were to put one theme across the whole Bible, he summarizes it this way. God is saying, I will be with you. Will you be with me? Every story, you can lay that all the way across the whole saga of the history of the people of God, and never more clearly expressed than in what we celebrate as Christmas. The one who was glad to be with us showed up. And isn't it interesting that he showed up in a way that is magnetic? Not some heroic, controlling king, but a vulnerable, attractive baby. I mean, babies are like campfires. Everybody just sits around and stares at them. You know what I mean? When you walk into a room and you see a brand new baby, everybody's like, oh, so great. Many want to just hold. Oh, I'll hold. You need some help? No problem, right? Okay, airplanes, maybe not. But in rooms, people are excited to see babies. Isn't it interesting? I will be with you. I'm glad to be with you. There's joy in that. To reflect on moments of connection with God and remember and call to mind that his face lights up watching us in those moments. As I ran down the side of a mountain after the hardest climb on this race in the dark, there was a moment of just beautiful joy. When this past Thanksgiving, after 2 straight weeks of constant sickness, crankiness, and cooped upness with our family, ready to just end one another, Thursday was terrible. And then Friday, we sat down around a round table after having cooked not only lunch, but desserts together, laughing deeply, enjoying one another, glad to be together. And God, in that moment, saying, this is what's really happening. Sickness may have been happening, and maybe what's happening now, but this is what God is cultivating in your family. It's a joy, a gladness to be together. God invites us to that. And so listen, as we launch into this Christmas season, I hope that the relationship with God comes first. And I just want you to know, if you ever wondered, God is glad to be with you. Turn your face toward him. He's already waiting for you. In whatever way makes sense, place your hope in Jesus. I know that doesn't happen all at once. It's not like some kind of magical trigger or signing a thing. It's just, okay, what if I trust you this much for a relationship? God, take that step. Trust him. Invite him to bring good in your life. God, you say that you're glad to see me. Help me experience that. Respond to him in any way that you know how. Grab onto the person around you who's been following Jesus for a while and say, how do I take a step in Jesus' direction? Grab the prayer team, jump into Guest Central, check in with the people online. We would love to connect you with some people who have walked with Jesus and help you know how to take one step after another of hoping and expecting good with God, because he will be glad to be with you. Place your hope in Jesus. And followers of Jesus, let's cultivate hope in our relationship with God. Sometimes a rehearsal of what God has done in the scripture is so good, and discovering his character in the scripture is so good. Discover, but also tell the stories of God's faithfulness in your own life with other people. Like that introduction that I talked about. Spend some moments this week remembering why God is worth our hope, how he has shown up over and over and over, and certainly invite God over and over to bring hope, to stir up hope in you, to give you a confident expectation, to believe him deeply when Psalm 23 says, surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. God is glad to be with you, and he has good in mind for you for hundreds of years. For all the history of God, he has good in mind. He said, I'm glad to be with you. Let's stir that up. Let's cultivate that. But let's do this in our relationships with one another too. As I finish up real quick, in our relationships with one another, we can stir up hope. Sit down and have a face-to-face conversation. Show in your eyes and your face how glad you are to be with them. Let them soak up the joy of arriving in a place with you, and then have a great conversation around 2 things. 1, express the hopes and dreams you have with them and why you have them with them. Oh, man. I'm with you because this is what I love about you. This is what I enjoy about you. And this is what I think we're going to get to do together. Just stir up and cultivate some hope. And then look back and rehearse the ways that hope has been realized in your relationship so far. I've been married 22 years. I got a long list of things that we dreamed that God has brought about in unique and creative ways that just lock us in together. Spend some time cultivating hope in your relationships with one another, the ones that matter the most. And finally, put the two together. Our hope and joy with God and our hope and joy with people are inseparably tied and magnify one another when we lean into both. And so invite God, the very source of joy and hope, to be at the center of your relationship. Let your gladness to be together be magnified by a gladness for God to be with you, to walk in his direction, to trust him. God has so much good in mind as we set out in this season for our relationships to flourish, first with him and of course with others. Let's cultivate and stir up some hope. So this week in our relationships with one another and with God, let's build on the hope that we have. Look into God's word with some other people and remember the hope that we have, celebrate that. And with one another, cast some visions, celebrate some wins along the way. There's so much to hold on to. If there's any way we can support you along the way, we'd love to. Head over to canyonridge.org. You'll find everything you need as well as a way to contact us. Don't forget to share this with a friend, hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you soon.